The alarm screamed like a symphony of panic, red lights bouncing off every surface of the flagship's metallic corridors. And yet the alien queen moved with a grace that defied the chaos around her. Her ears, impossibly long and sharply pointed, twitched with every echoing blast, catching vibrations that the human intruders aboard her ship probably didn't even notice. She barked orders in her clipped, melodic voice, and her crew scrambled, fumbling with panels and weapons, some muttering curses in languages that sounded like a mix of wind and glass. She was certain her children were in grave danger. The thought twisted her chest like a vice. And then she saw him, the human, clumsy, panicked, and entirely unfit for interstellar heroics, yet inexplicably in the exact place her children needed protection. He tripped over a panel that seemed to float just enough to avoid proper footing, his hands flailing as he tried to grab something, anything, to stop himself from hitting the floor. When he finally steadied himself, he gave a small, sheepish grin and muttered, "Well, that could have gone better," as if slipping and nearly breaking his neck in the middle of a battle was just part of an awkward Monday. The queen's instinct was to scold, to order him away, but before she could form the words, a sudden volley of energy blasts tore through the corridor. Sparks flew, and the human dove forward, arms outstretched, scooping up her children as if gravity were merely a polite suggestion. One child with glowing eyes and twitching ears wrapped tiny fingers around his neck, while the other clutched at his jacket. The human staggered, cursed under his breath, and somehow managed to keep them both safe, rolling to the side just as a stray laser melted a section of the wall behind him. "Did you just dodge that?" the queen demanded, her voice a mixture of disbelief and irritation. He looked up, eyes wide and hair plastered to his forehead, panting. "I was aiming for graceful heroics, but I think I landed somewhere between messy acrobat and human pancake. You can pick." He offered a crooked smile that made the queen's chest tighten in an unfamiliar way. The corridor shook again, forcing the queen to grab a railing to keep from sliding. She glanced at her children, who now giggled at the human's antics, their fear momentarily eclipsed by the ridiculousness of their situation. I don't understand how this human," she began. But the words faltered as she watched him struggling to balance the children while simultaneously blocking an incoming drone with what looked like a floating snack capsule. The snack bounced harmlessly off the drone's armor, but the human's improvised attack somehow caused the machine to spin in place before self-destructing with a sputtering spark. The queen blinked. He actually did it. "Mostly luck," he admitted, brushing a smear of alien dust from his sleeve. "But don't tell anyone. I have a reputation to maintain." His voice carried a teasing edge that was infuriatingly human. As the human led them deeper into the ship, the queen noted how he interacted with her children. He mimicked their ear twitches, exaggerated his own expressions, and even spoke to them in mock alien phrases that made them squeal with delight. The queen had not laughed in decades, and yet a strange, light warmth spread through her chest. It was absurd, it was reckless, and somehow it was exactly what her family needed. "Are you always this clumsy?" she asked, attempting to regain composure while keeping a tight grip on the railing. He shrugged, one child draped over each arm like an overstuffed backpack. "Only when near adorable aliens, or during full-scale ship invasions. You pick." He winked at the smaller one, who returned the gesture with a tentative giggle. The queen's mind raced. She had prepared for threats, for spies, for assassins, for war, but never had she considered the possibility that her children's savior would be a bipedal, panic-prone creature who seemed to trip over everything but somehow survived. It defied logic, and yet the evidence was undeniable. Her children were safe, laughing even, and no enemy had touched them. They reached a junction where a pair of enemy drones blocked the path. The human crouched slightly, muttering about bad timing and worse snack choices, and then did something completely unexpected. He pressed a series of buttons on a nearby console while humming a ridiculous tune, and the floor suddenly shifted, flipping the drones upside down and tossing them harmlessly into a containment chute. The Queen's mouth fell open. You're improvising," she said, her tone somewhere between awe and frustration. "Call it creative problem-solving," he replied, grinning at the absurdity of it all. "You might want to take notes, or just laugh, either works." Her children clung to him, giggling and chatting excitedly about his antics, and for the first time, the Queen allowed herself a small, genuine smile. Fear still lingered, but it was tempered by the realization that trust might grow in the most unexpected of ways, especially when it came wrapped in humor and utter chaos. As they moved further into the ship, the human kept up a steady stream of commentary. "Seriously, who designed these corridors? Did someone think aliens would enjoy tripping humans, or is it just a hobby?" He ducked under a swinging security panel, narrowly avoiding a spark that shot out like a miniature firework. The Queen couldn't help but suppress a laugh, a sound that startled even her. Through corridors that twisted like a labyrinth and rooms that hummed with alien technology, the human navigated with a mixture of instinct and sheer ridiculous luck. Each near miss, each sarcastic remark, each clumsy but effective move wove a story of courage that no one aboard the flagship could have predicted. And all the while, her children clung to him, eyes wide with admiration, ears twitching in delight, completely unaware of the danger that still lurked beyond the next bulkhead. Finally, they reached a safer sector of the ship, one temporarily shielded from the invasion. The human set her children down carefully, brushing their tiny ears and ruffling their hair. "See, safe, mostly." "Okay, completely," he said with mock seriousness. "But don't tell their mom I said that. I like living dangerously." The Queen stood still, observing him, her chest tight with an emotion she didn't quite recognize. Gratitude, relief, something deeper, woven with humor and disbelief. She realized that this human, awkward, exasperating, fearless in his own ridiculous way, was more than a protector. He was a bridge between her fear and her hope, a living testament to the idea that courage often wore the most unexpected faces. "And you call yourselves the dominant species," she muttered under her breath, a smile tugging at her lips. "Hilarious, absolutely hilarious." He glanced at her, eyebrows raised, and said, "Hey, don't knock it till you've tried it. Humans may trip a lot, but we make up for it with style." For the first time in decades, laughter mingled with the alarm lights and the hum of the ship's systems. The human, with her children in tow, had turned terror into a strange, exhilarating adventure. And the Queen knew, even amidst the chaos, that the bond forming here, awkward, humorous, and utterly improbable, was the first step toward a trust that could reshape her world. The human sat cross-legged on the metallic floor of the flagship's safer sector, her children sprawled around him like tiny, glowing satellites. One tried to climb onto his shoulders, ears twitching in an exaggerated imitation of the Queen's own, and the other poked at his belt buckle, fascinated by the strange contraption that somehow controlled gravity fields. "Careful, careful," he warned, laughing as the smaller one yanked it like it owed them money. "This isn't a toy." "Well, okay, maybe it is, but I charge extra for repairs." The children giggled, the sound light and infectious, and even the Queen, leaning against the wall with her arms crossed, felt the tension in her chest loosen a fraction. She couldn't deny it. The human had a way of turning chaos into amusement. She watched him carefully, noting the odd ease with which he interacted with her children. Unlike her attendants, who hovered like statues, tense and precise, he was messy, unpredictable, and utterly captivating. "How do you know how to do that?" she asked, nodding toward the tiny gravity manipulations he performed to keep the children from floating off in zero-gravity patches. "Honestly," he said, giving a mock-thoughtful look, "I don't. I just wave my hands, hope for the best, and occasionally yell physics, 'Don't fail me now.'" The children erupted in laughter, and the Queen couldn't help the faint smile that tugged at her lips. Outside, the flagship's corridors groaned and vibrated as the remnants of the enemy incursion were dealt with. Explosions, though muffled, still rattled the walls, But inside this small bubble of relative calm, a strange domesticity had settled. The human, ever the comedian, decided it was the perfect time to teach her children human survival skills. He demonstrated how to duck under imaginary laser beams, overact dramatically when dodging them, and make exaggerated pew-pew noises to scare invisible opponents. The children copied him, their tiny ears twitching wildly as they shouted nonsensical phrases that somehow sounded heroic in their alien tongue. The queen, watching this spectacle, felt something she hadn't felt in years. Amusement mixed with genuine relief. "Don't tell me you teach your children this," she asked, trying to maintain her dignity, though her eyes betrayed her curiosity. He shrugged. "Oh, we teach survival, empathy, and apparently dramatic sound effects. It builds character." He paused, eyes twinkling. "Also, if you can make enemies laugh at you instead of shooting you, you've got an advantage." The queen tilted her head, a faint chuckle escaping before she could stop it. "This is absurd." "Yes," he said solemnly, nodding like a wise philosopher. "Absurd is my middle name. Well, not legally, but it should be." He glanced at her children, who were now attempting to launch small, floating snack capsules like missiles at each other. And highly effective, apparently. Later, he led them through a maintenance corridor to a small observation deck, where the stars stretched endlessly outside, a glittering void that could inspire terror or wonder. "Beautiful, isn't it?" he asked, motioning toward the galaxy beyond the reinforced glass. One child pressed a tiny hand against the window, eyes wide. "Human-made or natural?" One of the children asked in halting common, the universal tongue of interstellar trade. The human laughed, a rich, absurd sound that echoed off the metal walls. "I'll go with natural. It's free, too. No subscription required, unlike half the apps on my planet." The queen observed quietly as the human pointed out constellations in a clumsy, almost arbitrary pattern, giving each star ridiculous names that made the children howl with laughter. As they lingered, he noticed the queen watching him, her face unreadable but her attention focused. "You're quiet," he said, tilting his head. "Do you humans, or, aliens, have a term for silently judging my stellar comedy skills?" The queen pursed her lips, suppressing a grin. "I am evaluating your performance." "Perfect," he said, holding up his hands in mock surrender. "I accept your judgment. 10 out of 10, probably." He lowered his voice and added, "But honestly, I'm aiming for 7. Realistic goals, you know." Their moment of respite was interrupted by a sudden alert. A rogue maintenance drone, confused by the battle's aftermath, skidded into the observation deck. The human, without missing a beat, scooped up the children, darted sideways, and used one of the floating snack capsules to trip the drone. It crashed in a heap, sparks flying, while the children squealed in delight. "Impressive," the queen admitted, crossing her arms, though a reluctant smile tugged at her lips. "Your improvisation is effective." "Mostly luck," he said, bowing with exaggerated flair. "But if anyone asks, it's skill. Skill with a touch of theatrical genius." He glanced at her, his grin widening. "You might want to consider hiring me permanently. I come with a built-in entertainment package." The queen shook her head, both exasperated and amused. "You are infuriatingly human." "And you," he said, tipping an imaginary hat, "are hilariously alien." He paused, watching the children mimic his gestures with growing confidence. "Together, we could rule a galaxy. Or at least survive it with style." Over the following hours, the human taught the children rudimentary navigation skills, encouraging them to push buttons at random to see what happened, provided the consequences weren't immediately lethal. The queen watched, noting how quickly the children learned, how their confidence grew under his unconventional methods, and how her fear for them had started to transform into trust. She realized the absurdity of it. This bumbling human, who could barely survive without tripping over himself, had become a stabilizing force in her children's lives. Even the ship's artificial intelligence seemed to recognize the shift. Lights flickered to accommodate their movements, and minor systems hummed in gentle harmony instead of chaos. The human, unaware of the subtle shift, made jokes at every corner. You know, for a species that supposedly invented faster-than-light travel, your hallways are terrifyingly long. I need a coffee break just to reach the end. The queen allowed herself another chuckle. You will not be spoiled by this victory, she said, though her tone lacked the usual sharpness. I prefer enriched experience. Thank you very much, he replied, doing a mock bow. And by the way, the children have officially declared me the funniest human alive. That's a title you can't argue with. As the chapter drew on, the human's humor and clumsy heroics wove a strange comfort through the trio. The queen realized that the laughter, the shared ridiculousness, and the human's fearless improvisation had transformed her fear into something far stronger: trust. In the middle of a galaxy riddled with danger, she had discovered an unexpected ally who, despite every logical reason to doubt him, had proven that courage, humor, and heart were sometimes the ultimate weapons. And for the first time since the alarms began, she allowed herself to hope. The ship shook violently, lights flickering as alarms echoed through the corridors. The enemy had returned, their assault stronger and more calculated this time. The queen's children clung to the human instinctively, one perched on each arm as he sprinted down the twisting passageways. Sparks rained from damaged panels overhead, and the occasional blast threw him off balance, yet he grinned through it all, muttering, "Well, if this isn't an extreme workout, I don't know what is." One of the children squealed, not from fear, but from the thrill of seeing him tumble over a low bulkhead while still holding both of them safely. The queen followed close behind, her long ears twitching with each vibration and alarm, trying not to scold him for every near slip. She had realized by now that his reckless courage was more effective than the precise, controlled strategies of her elite soldiers. He improvised in ways no protocol could anticipate. He flipped switches, redirected energy flows, and even used floating supply pods as impromptu shields. "Seriously," he said as a pod bounced harmlessly off his shoulder, "I hope someone's taking notes on this genius. If we survive, we should patent it. Human ingenuity, now with dramatic flair." They ducked into a maintenance shaft, crawling through tight spaces that would have slowed anyone else to a crawl. The human, however, jabbed at panels, humming a tune, and somehow reversed a small gravity loop, sending them sliding down a tube with the children laughing in delight. The queen, holding on to the edge of the tube with one hand, shook her head. "You are absurdly effective," she admitted, her tone more awed than annoyed. At the next junction, the main assault drones blocked their path. The human held up a finger as if haggling with fate. "Okay, let's see. We can go left and risk a thermal vent explosion, or right and meet angry robots, or, oh, I have an idea that's probably illegal somewhere." He dove toward a console, pressing buttons randomly while muttering, come on, physics, don't fail me now." The drones immediately spun out of control, colliding and collapsing into one another in a spectacular, sparks-filled heap. The children cheered, and the queen, hiding a smile behind her hand, had to admit she felt something like pride, or maybe relief. As they pressed onward, the queen's fear began to transform completely. She had gone from rigid control to watching this human take charge with unorthodox methods, and she realized that her trust in him wasn't just grudging, it was profound. She saw her children safe, happy, and learning from his humor, and that bond of trust was cementing in real time. She began to understand that her idea of strength, of leadership, had been too rigid. Courage and loyalty could take unexpected forms, sometimes wrapped in sarcasm, clumsiness, or a floating snack pod. They reached the command deck, where the enemy leader hovered in a hovering assault mech, firing energy blasts at the ship's controls. The human, children still in arms, ducked behind a console and whispered, "Okay, plan B mostly improvisation. Slight chance of total chaos, but hey, that's my brand." He activated an emergency override, causing the mech to misfire, its targeting systems looping on itself. The queen, seeing this, finally stepped forward, her own hands glowing with bioenergy, slicing through the remaining drones with precise strikes. Together, human ingenuity and alien precision formed an unstoppable combination. The children cheered and mimicked their movements, one attempting to shoot sparks from their tiny hands, the other spinning in excitement. The queen laughed aloud for the first time, the sound mingling with alarms and sparks in a strangely beautiful cacophony. The human glanced at her, raising an eyebrow. "See, told you teamwork was stylish. Plus, we get bonus points for comedy." After a tense few minutes, the enemy mech systems overloaded, sending it spinning helplessly into the void outside the ship. The alarms faded, replaced by the soft hum of the flagship system stabilizing. The humans set the children down, brushing their glowing ears and ruffling their hair. "See, safe, sound, and ready for more stories about that time we survived certain death." The queen approached, placing her hands on his shoulders, her long ears brushing lightly against his arms. "I doubted you," she admitted softly. "I underestimated your humanity and your courage." He grinned, shrugging. "Part of the charm also comes with a built-in humor warranty. Laughter guaranteed under all conditions, especially near panic." The children ran between them, chattering excitedly and trying to mimic both of their gestures. The queen watched them, then looked back at the human. "You've changed something in me," she said quietly. "Fear has turned into trust, panic into hope, and laughter, which I had forgotten existed in moments like this." He blinked, a little caught off guard. "Wow, that's high praise. I didn't even have to dodge any more lasers to earn it." He chuckled, then added, "Though just in case, I'd still prefer to dodge the lasers." The queen allowed herself a small, genuine smile. She realized she had learned something from this human, something beyond tactics or survival. She had learned that courage came in unpredictable forms, that trust could be built through absurdity, humor, and empathy. And in that moment, she knew she could face the galaxy with her children protected, not just by soldiers, but by allies who defied convention and expectation. The human holding the children again glanced around at the calm aftermath, shrugging as if it were no big deal. "Well, that went better than expected. Mostly. Okay, completely." He winked at her. "So what's next, Cake? More chaos? Or do we start a proper alien-human buddy comedy series?" The queen laughed, a light melodic sound that carried across the deck. "We survive first," she said, though her tone lacked any of its previous sharpness. "Then perhaps we may consider Cake." He nodded solemnly, dramatically saluting with a snack pod in hand. "Roger that, Your Majesty. Cake mission accepted. But I warn you, I bring highly unorthodox frosting skills." The children cheered, bouncing between them. And for the first time, the queen allowed herself to simply be. Her children safe, her ally steadfast, and a human whose humor and heart had changed her world. The flagship floated quietly in the void, the stars beyond glittering like distant promises, and the bond between queen, human, and children was sealed, not by fear, but by trust, laughter, and shared survival. In the days that followed, the flagship resumed its orbit through the galaxy, repaired and fortified, yet a new energy pulsed through its halls. The queen observed her children learning, exploring, and laughing under the human's guidance, and she herself discovered joy in moments she had long thought lost. Every corridor they passed, every system they activated, carried a subtle echo of that improbable partnership. The human, ever self-aware of his comedic timing, often muttered absurd commentary about gravity loops, alien corridors, and his heroic feats, yet his actions spoke louder than words. He had taught them all that courage was unpredictable, trust could flourish in chaos, and humor could survive even in the most desperate moments. As the queen stood in the observation deck, gazing at the stars with her children beside her, she reflected on the journey. Fear had given way to hope, panic to laughter, and strangers had become family. The galaxy beyond was vast and perilous, yet she faced it with a new certainty. Allies could appear in the most unexpected forms, and trust and courage could grow in the strangest, most wonderful ways. The human nudged her gently with an elbow. "You look thoughtful, or worried, or plotting revenge on those drones. Either way, I approve." She looked at him, her long ears twitching, and smiled fully this time. "I am neither plotting nor worrying," she said. "I am grateful, and perhaps entertained." "Good," he said, bowing dramatically. "Because I come with a full package of entertainment, hazard pay, and occasional heroics." The children laughed, wrapping themselves around him, and for the first time the queen allowed herself to simply watch, feeling the unshakable bond that had formed. The crisis had passed, but the transformation of trust, courage, and shared laughter would endure, a quiet testament to the power of unlikely allies in an unforgiving galaxy. The flagship glided onward, stars streaking past, and in that moment the queen knew that they were not merely surviving, they were living together and stronger for it.